And like I said, we got a global audience. So I'm in Africa. We got people tuning in from America, Australia, of course, Europe. So a lot of people, they're not familiar with the history of Australia. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the challenges that Indigenous people face living in Australia?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges, definitely. Um, you know, some people may or may not know this, and I guess it's something that some people take with a grain of salt to either way, one way or the other. But so-called Australia is the only Commonwealth country that doesn't have a treaty with Indigenous people. And again, I say that with a grain of salt in the sense of I acknowledge that treaties are not always honored for the given people that the treaties are made with, and they are broken again and again, unfortunately, for the Indigenous people relating to that. So I guess where we're at over here, there's, I suppose, a lot of questions and perspectives about that. There are many people that support the idea of that. And then I suppose there's a big conversation around who is the treaty with? Is it with regional areas, or is it with Australia as a whole, or is it with the Crown going all the way back to Great Britain? And then is that with the current Queen of the Crown? So there's a lot of conversation around that. But then there's, I suppose, there's a lot of right wing sentiment in regards to perspectives that don't believe that there's any extra justice that needs to be addressed in terms of where we are in this land. And for those that may know a little bit about this country and how colonization begun here, was on the basis of terra nullius, which meant no man's land. And basically, I suppose it could be said that many do take to, that typical Western concept of society of Westerners came and built something, and now that's something that everybody could take great privilege in. And so you have, I guess, a really tricky predicament in terms of trying to move forward to have healing on grounds that, from a First Nations perspective, we feel that there is a lot more work that needs to be done. We feel that we need to be acknowledged as original custodians of this land, and that a lot of the past wrongs that have happened, it needs to be addressed. And big parts of that relate to where is the land currently, and how is that currently getting exploited, and how has that put our people at a severe disadvantage in society. So there's a lot of commonalities in terms of countries like so-called US, where there were indigenous people moved off the land and enslaved people, and indigenous people were enslaved. We were helping to build the colony here of so-called Australia. And so you do have that intergenerational colonial wealth that you have in most other Western countries. And we haven't yet got to a point where that's really been stared straight down the eye of what it is and said, hey, what does it look like to make sure that we have equal opportunity for a successful life and a healthy life for everybody on this land? And certainly Indigenous people who have cared for this land for 80,000 plus years as one of the oldest known living cultures in the world, as is documented and so often said. We do feel that with the care that we gave to this country for 80,000 plus years, that absolutely we should have a right to be able to continue that again in the most powerful possible way and help build a society that we wish we could have built when everybody started to share this land with us. We wish that we had a chance to build a so-called country where everybody could feel loved and connected and part of this beautiful, intrinsic, interconnected, beautiful thing that was symbiotic with the land that we live upon, which is very much the indigenous way of doing things out here in this land, and hence why our societies had such a minimal impact on the land. And when the colonizers came here, they looked at the land, and there's documents of journals that they wrote, and they said it looked like a beautifully manicured, untouched garden space because it was just so perfect and pristine in their mind. But little did they know or realize that there was amazing things such as indigenous agriculture that was working all through that land, and that our people were moving in these beautiful cycles upon various different parts of a particular part of the landscape to create this, I guess, this tapestry that was in alignment with country. And we still very much, we haven't given up wanting to have that again in the fullest sense. And every day, Indigenous people are practicing that in as much as what they can. Obviously, in some parts of the country, there's bigger impacts than others. So I come from the southeast where we were absolutely decimated down to, our last 10% of people or so on and so forth. So there's massacres all across this whole country. So hence, myself, my father is not Indigenous, but even on my mother's side, there's a lot of colonial history there and impacts upon that bloodline. But, one thing I love to acknowledge about Indigenous people is that spirit is strong, like nobody's looking at giving up on what it means to be a custodian of this land and how we should actually be continuing that role not only today but well into the future as far as we can see. So, we have, unfortunately, some of the highest, impoverishment rates in the world, some of the most impoverished people in the world. We have the highest imprisonment rates of any particular distinct group of people in the world. We have the highest suicide rates of any group of people in the world as well. So, in many ways, it's definitely tough going. But, on the other hand, there's a lot of hope. So it's Australia is a tricky country in that regard. In that there's a lot of people that want to do good and understand the plight of Indigenous people, and have come on that journey with us to, help elevate and create a beautiful situation. And that's alive and well. That's very much happening. And then on the other hand, for example, our current government is the right wing, and they, I dare say, they laugh at Indigenous rights. They have been documented to do that. They do not value the need for a treaty. They do not value the need for Indigenous people to have more access back to land. And it's kind of that mentality of what's happened, what's happened, and let's just keep on rolling on as things currently are and try and make the best of it that you can. So it's a strange place in that sense when you have such a mixed up sort of cocktail of where people are at, which I guess people can relate to that all around the world, and particularly in Western societies.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I truly appreciate you taking the time to break that down.